Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum. Peace be unto you. Welcome back to the Septuagint versus the Masoretic. Today we're looking at Judges chapter 5. There are 31 verses. Beginning in verse 2, we have a significant difference here. A revelation was made versus the avenging. Verse 3, omission of the word a psalm. The words a psalm. Verse 4, land versus field. This sounds like a future prophecy. Let's just read this verse. O Yah, or O Adonai, and you're going forth on Seir, when you went forth out of the land of Edom, the earth quaked, and the heaven dropped dews, and the clouds dropped water. Again, this sounds like future prophecy. I don't believe this happened yet. I could be wrong. Maybe it did happen because of the victories that Israel was given over Canaan. Verse 5, shaken. The mountains were shaken versus they melted. There's an omission of the face of in regards to Yah 2 times. And then verse 6, significant difference, deserted. They deserted the ways versus unoccupied. So this is a figurative speaking of the way of the law or the way of the Torah of Yah. Deserting it or unoccupying these ways. There's an omission as well in this verse. They went in crooked paths. So this is speaking of morality and how the children of Israel lived, walking in crooked paths. Verse 7, significant difference again. The mighty men in Israel failed versus the villages ceased. So it's one thing to have your villages to no longer exist, but it's another thing altogether to have the military force, the strength of your military failing. This is referring to Moses and Joshua, perhaps. The mighty men, I mean. And this refers to Deborah in the third person versus the first person I. So it's the narrator referring to Deborah. In the Masoretic, this is like a diary of Deborah. Deborah's diary is what we're reading in the Masoretic. In verse 8, the cities of rulers fought versus war in the gates. So the cities fought each other versus there was a civil war, possibly. Verse 9, my heart inclines to the orders given in Israel versus my heart is toward the governors of Israel. So your heart is towards the commands given versus towards the people themselves. Verse 10, she, I'm going to say donkey in this case, she donkey versus white donkeys. There's an omission of noonday as to what time it is during the day. It's important. It's the hottest part of the day. Omission of seat as well, judgment seat. And an omission of by the roads, of them that sit in judgment, and as well declare. The word declares. A lot of omissions in that verse 10. Verse 11, disturbers versus archers. Relate versus rehearse. So to relay, spread the news, of versus to rehearse, to imitate, or to practice. O Lord, increase righteous acts in Israel. Then the people of Yah went down to the cities, versus the righteous acts of Yah, even the righteous acts toward the inhabitants of his villages in Israel. Then shall the people of Yah go down to the gates. Okay, what's the difference here? Let's read this carefully. O Lord, increase righteous acts in Israel. Masoretic, the righteous acts of Yahweh, the righteous acts toward the inhabitants. Okay, so one is an entreating the Lord. One's a prayer, beseeching the Lord. The other one is simply saying, it's a statement, it's not a prayer. Then the people of the Lord went down to the cities. Then shall the people go down to the gates. So one is a narrative, or perhaps it is saying, as a result of increasing righteous acts, then the people will go down to the cities. Whereas in the Masoretic, it is only a narrative. The righteous acts, then shall the people go down, doesn't make sense. Only makes sense. This makes more sense if this is indeed a prayer, which it is in the Septuagint. So one is a plea to Yah, the other is a narrative. Okay. Question. What is the significance of the people going down to the cities or the gates? That's a question I ask you, because I don't know the answer for that. Verse 13. Significant difference. Then went down the remnant to the strong. The people of the Lord went down for him among the mighty ones from me. Okay. This is the song of Deborah and Barak, it's called. Verses, then he made him that remains have dominion over the nobles. So one is saying the remnant went to the strong. The other one is saying they dominated the nobles. They had victory over them. The people of the Lord went down for him among the mighty ones from me, Deborah or Barak. Masoretic, among the people, Yahweh made me have dominion over the mighty. So it seems to be in the Septuagint, these are armies gathering. Israel is gathering the remnant to the strong, and then the people of the Lord went down for the Lord among the mighty ones from Deborah or Barak. So they're gathering together. They're strengthening their forces by consolidating them all. The Masoretic, it's saying these people are fighting against each other. The remnant fighting the nobles, and then I won, I being me, the me here being Barak or Deborah, we won over the mighty. So they're not consolidating. It's the people went down to Barak or Deborah versus Barak or Deborah exalting themselves. Verse 14. Ephraim rooted them out in Amalek. Significant difference here. So Ephraim rooted them out in Amalek versus out of Ephraim was there a root of them against Amalek. So one is saying Ephraim had victory over Amalek, uprooted them. Masoretic is saying Ephraim has a root. A root came out of Ephraim to fight Amalek, so they didn't win. Okay. So they defeated or displaced or evicted or destroyed the enemy, Amalek, versus this is a description of the forces coming from Ephraim. And then continuing on in this verse 14, behind thee was Benjamin, among thy people, versus after thee, Benjamin, among thy people. So one is a military strategic order of the forces that fought Amalek, because behind you was Benjamin, versus the order of the forces. These were the order of the forces, yes, but possibly they did not fight, because it does not allude to them fighting. The inhabitants of Machir, or Machir, however you want to pronounce it, the inhabitants of Machir came down with me, searching out the enemy. Versus out of Machir came down governors. So Machir joined their forces. Why? As reconnaissance, to search out the enemy. Versus it is unrelated to the military campaign. They were related, Machir was, to the government of Israel. To do what is uncertain. We don't know what their purpose is, but they are coming down governors to govern. That's my assumption anyway. Verse 15, we're going to ignore that one. Latter part of 15, great pangs reached to the heart versus great thoughts or searchings of the heart. So this one is hard to figure out which one it is really. Verse 16, there's a difference of punctuation. After Reuben, the name Reuben, or after the flocks. So Reuben perhaps is known for searchings of the heart. So again, this is a big question mark. I'm not sure which one it is, because it does say searchings in the Septuagint in verse 16. Whereas it says great pangs in brackets, so perhaps it is great searchings of the heart and great thoughts. It's hard to say. That one is mysterious. I will just leave it at that. Verse 17, sat down on the sea coasts versus continued on the sea. Ports versus breaches. In verse 18, significant difference. Zabulon exposed their soul to death versus Naphtali came to the high places. I should say that's in the same verse. Zabulon exposed their soul to death. Naphtali came to the high places. So what happens here in the Masoretic, that it combines both these narratives together. It says, Naphtali, a people jeoparded their lives unto the death in the high places of the field. Zebulun and Naphtali. So they combine both people, saying, no, Zebulun didn't expose their soul to death, and Naphtali didn't come to the high places. They both did both of those things. They combine the events together. Land versus field. Verse 20, significant difference as the stars from heaven, which are angels, most likely, versus the stars. So this could be the king's... Oh, hold on. The stars from heaven versus the stars. So these are angels versus the kings fought from heaven. So the kings mentioned in the previous verse, they fought from heaven. Doesn't make sense how they could do that unless they were angels. Unless these are angels themselves fighting with Sisera. Verse 21, the brook versus the river. SD, the second half of the verse. My soul, or I should say my mighty soul, will trample him down. Sisera. Versus, O my soul, you have trodden down strength. It is vague as to who is being trodden down in the Masoretic. Verses 22 to 23, entangled versus broken. And his mighty ones, again, possibly angels, versus their mighty ones, which is Sisera's men. So they help fight alongside Yah's angels. versus they help fight Sisera's men. You can see that his help among the mighty, the angels, versus against the mighty, Sisera's men. Verse 25, SD, butter of princes versus lordly dish. A butter and a lordly dish. Let me just write that down there, butter, so that we keep this honest. Verse 26, omit, left, in regards to hand. So she didn't just take any hand, or whichever hand, it was her left hand to the nail, and then her right hand to the hammer, which makes sense. SD, nailed through his head versus pierced and stricken through his temples, which means to smote off his head. So it says smote off his head. So she cut off his head, sounds like, whereas she nailed through his temples. So actually the Septuagint confirms, did not the tent nail, the tent peg, whatever you want to call it, did not go through one temple, went through both. So she was strong enough to pierce or nail through his head from one side to the other. So it could be the length of a palm. It could be the length of a cubit. It's hard to say. But if he had a small head, well, you know what? The nail could still go through in either way, whether it's a cubit or a span, depending how big the hand is. Verse 27, omission. Rolled down between her feet. Sisera did when he died. So that's an important point. So he was between her feet. He fell and lay between her feet. So maybe he was attracted to her. Maybe they were intimate, and she used herself as a honeypot, perhaps. Verse 28. My question here is, why was his chariot ashamed? It says, actually, it's not my question. It's the question being asked here. Why was his chariot ashamed? Perhaps his chariot was tentative. Is that what it means? That statement, why is his chariot so long in coming? Did it wait? So this gives a little bit clarity, the Masoretic. Why did it wait? Or why was it ashamed? Why did the wheels of his chariot tarry? So it's like it's ascribing emotions to the chariot, or maybe the chariot driver. Were they ashamed? Why did they wait? Were they, when you say ashamed, thoughts come up of being ashamed of yourself. No, maybe could be shamed as in honor versus shame. Were you glorified or were you shamed? So his chariot was shamed in this case because of a woman, Yael, killing him. Sisera, not just any man, but a prominent man in the army. Very prominent man. I think he's still known to this day, Sisera. Okay, verse 30, significant difference. Will they not find him dividing the spoil? So will they not find Sisera dividing the spoil? Versus have they not sped? A big difference, they added to every man a damsel or two. So these are those kinds of slaves, sex, or concubines, perhaps. It says to every man, not just one damsel, but two. One or two. And an addition of on both sides, the embroidery, the needlework. And then lastly, we close with the spoils for his neck, Sisera's neck, versus for the necks of them that take the spoils, whoever's robbing Sisera, perhaps. So that's all for this chapter. It was quite lengthy. Thank you very much for your time. Till next time, we'll look at Judges chapter 6. That might be coming most likely tomorrow, I think. And thank you once again for your time and your attention. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Appreciate you listening and going through the truth of the scriptures with me. So until next time, I bid you all Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum, and peace be unto you.